What if comparison culture, when used correctly, doesn't steal your joy at all, but actually fuels your growth? Welcome back to the Mental Weight Room, where we train the brain just like you train your body. I'm your host and mental performance coach, Antoinette, and today I'm excited to welcome Jake Thompson to the show. Jake is a keynote speaker, performance coach, and the chief encouragement officer at Compete Every Day, a brand he started in 2011 selling t-shirts out of the trunk of his car, which are now being worn by leaders in over 62 countries. He's been featured in Forbes and Inc. magazine, hosts a podcast with over 2 million downloads, and has impacted more than 135,000 ambitious leaders worldwide. Jake is the author of 3 books: Lead Better Now, a practical guide to increase your influence; Compete Every Day, the not-so-secret secret to winning your work and life; and The Line, a story of excellence in the margins. His 4th book, Beat Yesterday, the playbook for playing life up to your full potential, was released in April. Jake is also an athlete. Sadly, however, after earning a scholarship to play at TCU in Texas, he suffered a season-ending injury before his freshman year ever started. Jake brings a powerful and sometimes countercultural perspective to mental performance, especially around comparison, competition, and grit. Jake, welcome to the Mental Weight Room. I'm so glad to finally meet you.
Yeah, same here. Super excited to be with you today.
Okay, let's jump right in. I always tell the athletes that I coach that the mental work that they're doing, the training that they're doing, isn't just for sports. It's something that's going to transcend everything they do in life. And you're a perfect example of that. Your success is a perfect example of how you turned your mental toughness that you gained through sports into business acumen.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that because for me, sports is the perfect training ground for preparation for life. But a lot
Right.
of times when we are in that athlete stage, we're not thinking about that, right? We're thinking about earning the starting position and winning the game and the championship and all of that. And so that was a lot of my life as well. This struggle as an athlete growing up, high school, and honestly was a struggle in life, was finding my identity and sense of worth in could I beat you? I was a smaller athlete. I don't know, my senior year of high school, I was 5'11", 150 pounds, which is incredibly small for a quarterback, especially in Texas. And I just always had this chip on my shoulder mentality. I'm going to outwork you and outsmart you because that's where I found worth is could I be better than you on the roster, in the classroom, who was dating the more popular people in school. And that's a really dangerous game, as I found out when I got to college, in that there's times in life you don't have people that you're directly measuring yourself against. And for me, I was a small
Right.
town kid, 13,000 people in our hometown, graduated with 250 or so. I knew growing up, who did I have to be better than? Who was the guy ahead of me a year? Who was behind me? Who was more athletic? And so my whole life from a mental perspective, like I didn't have any of the mental skills we talk about now. But the biggest struggle for me was really competing with myself and not getting caught in this comparison trap and putting my worth in that comparison trap.
I know losing football had to be devastating. I was an athlete my whole life, and I can't even imagine having lost my sports before I was ready to quit or retire. So, how did losing football shape your identity and the way you now coach others?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I was listening to the intro, and for a lot of our listeners, I'm going to throw a curveball to you that honestly we revealed in Lead Better Now. So I had scholarship opportunity. I was an academic and athletic scholarship player to go to TCU. Got hurt the summer before my freshman year. Was given the opportunity to have surgery or go through a pretty intense rehab and see if it healed it. As I shared, I'm 5'11", 150, maybe 60
Yeah.
pounds, and so I was going to have a lot of surgeries on that shoulder. So I said, hey, I'll be a freshman. Let me rehab. I'll go out in the spring. And my freshman year of college, as some of our college listeners can relate, it wrecked me confidence-wise out the window
Yeah.
because I showed up smart. In my head, I was smart. I'd attached a fixed mindset around this because I made straight A's pretty easily in high school. My mom was an
Right.
elementary school teacher, so I kind of had a head start on stuff. And I didn't know how to study. And I'm pulling all-nighters just to fail classes. To this day, I swear one of my teachers passed me because I would just ask questions, not because I had any idea what was going on in class.
Right. Right.
And so in the classroom, my identity and who I thought I was just got wrecked. At the
Yeah.
same time, I'm having to rehab my shoulder, and I don't have anybody to measure up with. and I
Right.
really start to spiral mentally. And so at that point, like a lot of us, we don't know what's going on internally. We
Right.
just know something's off, and we're sad, we're depressed. And so I'm trying to fill the void with everything. Parties, girls, anything and everything I can, because I'm like, I got to find some sense of worth, some confidence in places I traditionally went to where I positioned myself wasn't there. So I get on a schedule by myself, and I'm working out by myself. And all of our athletes, especially our college athletes, can relate. The scariest human, in my opinion, is a college strength coach when you're a freshman. Like, they don't really
Yeah.
talk to you. They kind of grunt, right? And if you're somebody who
Yeah.
they don't really know. And so it was me and Don Summers in the weight room. And I would go in and do my workouts because I was on my own little schedule until spring ball. And the whole time I had this fear that I didn't belong, that they were going to ask me to leave. And it just
Yeah.
hovered over me like this dark cloud. And honestly, my shoulder was starting to heal up. I was feeling better, but I was terrified because I hadn't gotten a playbook. And so if I couldn't study, I couldn't outsmart you and outwork you. I didn't know who to measure up against. And so a couple of months
Right.
into my freshman year, I just lost it. I went in for a
Yeah.
workout. I finished the workout. I caught my reflection in the mirror, and I just hated the person looking back at me. And I was
Yeah.
terrified that I wouldn't be good enough at the thing I came here to do. I told everybody in college I was here to play ball. Everybody in my hometown knew I'd come to play football. And my thought was, if I'm not good enough to do it, how much of a loser am I? I can't go
Mhm.
home. I can't stay here. And so I spiraled, and I walked out on my dream really before giving myself a chance to compete for it, because I was
Yeah.
terrified of losing. But more than anything, I was terrified of what other people might say and how I compared. And so
Right.
when you talk about how that shaped me, that was my dirty secret for 15 years. Guys on the
Wow.
football team would come out and watch me do intramurals, and they'd be like, "You've got to come play." And I'm like, my shoulder can't take it. I made up every excuse. Nobody knew this story until a few years ago. And I was sharing it in talks with a few friends that are speakers, and they're like, "You got to share that story." And it's crazy how many other athletes and audience members could relate to it. But what it did is it really ate me alive, because I cheated myself to see what I was
Yeah.
capable of. I could have rode the
Yeah.
bench for 4 years and been totally satisfied that I gave my best, rather than not giving my best. And
Yeah.
the irony of it is, when I started compete every day, it's because I was seeing friends and people I worked with and worked out with starting to make the same decisions. They would stay
Mhm.
comfortable in toxic relationships or in jobs that they didn't really love because they were
Right.
scared of change. And it
Yeah.
just tore me up. And so that's ultimately why I started compete. So even though it carried over me, it was an embarrassment, it was a shame, it's probably one of my biggest life regrets of not giving myself a chance. It ultimately became the spark that set me down the path to the work I'm doing now, which
Yeah.
ironically, most people that work in mental performance and sports psychology I talk to is like, "Oh, I struggled at that. And so now I want to help people not make the decisions
Yeah.
or overcome it what I did."
It's such a great story because as much as we try to help kids cultivate a growth mindset, which is basically what you did, your
Yeah.
mindset shifted and you took failure and used it as data to make a change in your life or to do something that you thought might be impossible. And look at what you've done with that. Once you flip failure on its head and you realize that it's not devastating, it's part of growing, and you can use it to collect data and information to get better, that's a huge shift. I'm curious, did someone help you make that shift, or was that something that you just came to on your own?
What had happened is, when I walked away from ball, I just had this pit and feeling inside that I couldn't put a finger on. And
Yeah.
it was everything from the loss, like grieving the loss, to the shame. And so there was
Mhm.
years of struggling of what's going on, and mental performance coaches, it wasn't really a thing then. And so, like,
Right.
I'm not talking to anybody, but I was always a big reader. And so
Mhm.
after I got out of grad school, I made a big career change. I was having this success, and I'm just reading a lot. And I read a book by a guy named Donald Miller called A Million Miles in a Thousand Years. And the book said, great stories, movies, Star Wars, Harry Potter's, you name the classics, they all have three traits in common. There's a main character who's on a mission or purpose bigger than just for themselves. They're
Right?
willing to engage discomfort, fear, the unknown, and they invite others alongside them. And the book, Miller argues they make for great stories, but they make for even better lives. And I thought,
Right.
man, my story sucks. How do I change it? And so for
Yeah.
me as an athlete, physically is the easiest place for me. And so I went back into the gym, started working out, started reading about nutrition. But for the first time in my life, I went into the gym and it wasn't, is anybody else looking at me, or how much weight am I lifting
Right.
compared to them? It was like, can I just do a little better? And it
Yeah.
started to build this confidence because my focus was solely on what's in my control. I wasn't worried about where I measured up with these strangers. And as I physically changed, my mentality started to change. And so I was studying more and more, got into Carol Dweck's mindset and
Right.
Angela Duckworth's grit, and just started
Yep.
ferociously reading all of these things and going down all these paths because I was fascinated about the things I didn't know that I wish I'd known
Yes.
then. And
Right.
I'd learned something. I'm
Good.
like, oh, this is why I did that in high school. This
Right.
is why I behaved that way. All of it just clicks because your self-awareness. And that's
Right.
why for anybody listening, if you find a good book that you learn something, read it every couple of years,
Yeah.
because where you've grown in your life stage, you're going to see and learn things differently than you did
Yeah.
the first time you read it. And so for me, it was a lot of that. It wasn't, hey, somebody poured into me or I came across somebody. It was really, I just got to a point where I was like, I need to make a change because who I am and staying who I am it's going to cause what just happened again, right? I'm going to end up with
Yeah.
regret instead of saying, how do I actually live my best life?
I'm very competitive. I'm still a competitive athlete. I work with competitive athletes, and people who love to compete because they want to see, for me at least, I want to see what I can do. Sometimes I
Absolutely.
win, sometimes I don't win. But when I was younger, I wasn't happy unless my results supported the work that I was doing.
Yep.
And now, 50 years after my gymnastics career, I'm in another performance kind of sport. And, sometimes I place well, sometimes I don't place well. But my gauge is now, am I doing the best I can do given what I'm capable of in this moment? And but the comparison part is important because gives you a measurable. As
Yep.
long as you don't take that, and as long as you don't allow the comparison part of it to impact how you feel about yourself or your self-worth, or let it devastate you.
Yep.
When you work with people, and I know you believe that comparison can be a tool for growth, right? Rather than a
Yep.
threat to confidence. Uh, how did you come to that belief? How do you make that work for yourself or for others that you're coaching?
We know we are programmed to compare. There is a piece of it. The problem is, if we don't give our brains an objective target, it's going to pick anyone and everyone around us. And most times,
Uh,
because our brains tend to lean negatively, it's going to manufacture stories, which is why you go on social media and you see someone post something and we automatically create a story in our head of what's
mhm.
going on with them, how much better they are, how we don't measure up. And so comparison, there's a reason we always say it's the thief of joy. I say it does three things to us. It tricks us into saying, why bother? They're so far ahead of me. Why even bother putting in the work? Or dangerously, I'm so far ahead of them. Why bother like worrying about them being my
Mhm.
competition? Which the marathon that just happened, I think it was New York, right? The guy got
Yeah.
past at the very, very end because he was like just finishing, wasn't even worried about it. The second is the always behind. And this is the one I struggled with. We can just never catch up. You can never take a rest day. You can never do these things because somebody's going to be ahead of you. And then the last is you feel inferior. But comparison in and of itself is like fire. Fire will devastate or it'll save lives. Because if you're in the middle of the woods in the winter, it's the one thing that's going to keep you alive. It comes down to how you wield it. And so for me, you need standards. You need that comparison in twofold. And I say you need to know what world class looks like. You need to know in your position, the sport you play, the position you're in, what does excellence look like? No different than in the classroom. What does world class excellence look like as a student? Not to say, hey, where are you not world class and how are you not good enough? But you've got to know what that standard looks like, because for a lot of us, we don't understand there's levels to things. The best story
Yeah.
I ever heard of this, Tyronn Lue, who coached in the NBA, played in the NBA, he talked about he was a smaller guy. He was always the hardest worker. He had to be the hardest worker because he felt he was smaller. And he was like, man, I'm a hard worker. And then he went to the Washington Wizards. And a 40-year-old Michael Jordan joined the Wizards team that year.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, as I was watching Michael Jordan work, I realized, oh, that's what hard work looks like. There's levels that we're unaware of. So we need to know what world class looks like. So we have a standard of excellence to start working toward. But then the most important thing is we need a target that's 3% ahead of us. We know this from our proximal zone of growth. We need something that's just out of reach, but close enough to know that we can reach it. It's kind of like playing freeze tag as a kid.
Right.
You wanted to find the person who was closest to you or slowest so you could tag them and then run. You rarely went for the person all the way across the playground. And so when we find somebody who's just ahead of us, then we can start to evaluate and say, okay, not only what do they do better, but how, right? Kobe Bryant famously said, don't copy the what, copy the how. Don't copy my 30-point game, copy my drills, copy my footwork, copy my film sessions. Like those are the inputs, as we talked about, that we 100% control. And so when we have that, then it changes our mindset because we can go into our sport, whether it's gymnastics or football or basketball, and say, okay, what does world class look like at this position? Okay, basketball, world class, if I want to be a shooter, it's Steph Curry. Steph Curry shoots 250 shots after every practice. One of the things he has to do before he ever leaves the gym is make 10 free throws in a row, and 5 have to be a perfect swish. Now you start running those numbers. We ran those numbers. It's just shy of 3 million shots he's taken in practice during his NBA career. But we just see the game day. So if I know that's what world class looks like, I say, okay, if world class is that standard, what's the one right above me? Well, right now I don't have a post-practice routine. So maybe for me, if I look at my teammates and say, okay, who's a little better? They're a little bit better shooter than me. Cool. I'm going to spend 20 minutes after every practice making, not just taking, but making X number of shots. Now you start to say, okay, this is what I'm going to grow, because the beauty of that 3% is once you reach that level of like, oh, I'm on the same level now as this person. Who's next, right? Who's the next person I need to tag for the game? Then you start to gamify it and really put yourself in a position where you're consistently growing. It's every day the inputs start to stack, but we only do that if we're starting to say, where's the gap and how do I close it versus where's the gap and how am I not worthy? My third book is called The Line, and it's a fictional story about a high school quarterback, a junior, dealing with unhealthy comparison with his teammates. And we've all run sprints, and we all know what it means to touch the line or to stop short. And what happened is over the last few years as I've done this work, I get asked by a lot of parents in my audience, hey, my kid plays high school or college ball or middle school ball. Do you have something for them? And I really didn't. And as I was writing Beat yesterday and really teaching this framework in comparison, I was like, man, I struggled so much of this in high school. What if we did this? And so I really wrote this fictional story for this younger audience around this idea of if you're always comparing yourself to your teammate, you start competing with your teammate. And if you're competing against your teammate, you're actually hurting your team because you don't want your teammate to become their best. You want your teammate to do well, just never as good as you. And that hurts everyone. Versus if you look at your teammate and say, hey, how can we compete with each other in a healthy way that when you get better, it inspires me to get better? And for our younger athletes listening to this, that's the thing that sets you up for life. Because your entire life now becomes about playing to a standard and not the scoreboard, as Nick Saban would say. And your confidence comes from how do I play to my own standard versus worrying about what everyone else's scoreboard says.
One of the things that sticks out in my head from this book is that you're creating leaders, but leaders aren't always the people in the front of the pack. You can lead from the bench. You can lead from, the PT room because you're injured. Leadership is about attitude and how you conduct yourself, the example you set, and how you treat other people. And this book is I feel like it's almost more about cultivating leadership than anything else. It's such a great book for young kids. I'm so glad that you brought it up, but I want to talk about your fourth book.
Yeah.
Because it's called Beat Yesterday, the playbook for playing life up to your full potential. It's going to be released in April, so I haven't read it. I don't really know anything about it, which is why my next question is, why is beating yesterday a better way to pursue excellence than just chasing your personal best, like that moon goal?
So, okay, so let's rephrase that. So the idea of beat yesterday is actually chasing your best over the idea of being the best. See, we live in a culture that's all
Okay,
about being
gotcha.
the best. But
The
if you think
best.
about it, right, you could be the best player on your team. You could be the best player your school has ever had. Somebody else transfers in that's even better. It's not that you
Yeah.
got worse, it's that comparison shifted, right? Who you are.
Right.
And so all of the research around this shows the best is a moving target. And when we fixate our validation, our worth on the best, there's never enough because there's someone always ahead of us, or on the dangerous
Right.
side, we're always ahead of someone else. The pursuit of being your best, which is the idea of beating yesterday. How do I beat yesterday's best, right? How do I get a little bit better today? Incremental growth. This
Okay.
is the thing that fulfills us. And so what the book does is really take you through our compete framework, because the most important question we have is, what's the game you care about playing? There's never going to be a starting position, a sports championship, or a finish line that fulfills you. The research shows 25% of Olympic athletes, even those who medal, come home and experience depression. The best in the
Right.
world have achieved their dream and it falls off. They call this the hedonic treadmill, in that
Mm-hmm.
our baseline always resets. And so I know as an athlete, like, this is really hard to hear because we're like, no. You don't understand, Jake. State championship trophy or college scholarship or national like, that's going to fulfill me. But there's never been anyone who's done it. There's no amount of money, no award, no thing. And the problem is we put these finish lines in front of us that we believe are going to become fulfilling. And what all of the research shows is that from a mental health perspective, from an outcome perspective, we set ourselves up for disaster in the long run because there's never going to be that point. Now, the flip side of that, how do you set yourself up to win? It's the consistent growth and testing yourself to see what are you capable of. And so Beat Yesterday is really a framework. For one, how do we understand comparison in a different light of, like, okay, here's what to watch out for, but how do you use it to your advantage? And then how do we get really clear on the game we care about playing?
Right. Right. It's the process. I try to shift the attention from the outcome to the process, because you're right. The outcomes, the results, they're just byproducts of what we do,
Yep.
right? The process and who we are. So, Jake, this has been a great conversation, but as we get ready to wrap up, if there's one piece of advice you could pass on to today's audience, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the most important thing I would tell you is, and this sounds crazy coming from me because I would never have been this person as a kid, but creating the daily routine of journaling, what's the game I'm playing today and what's my competition? What's the thing standing in my way? Because it's often internal. Then you start to build the focus, like we've talked about today, of how do I do things better with what's in my control, and let go of needing validation or worth externally.
Yeah. Yeah. Finally, how can folks connect with you?
Jake Thompson Speaks, or our brand is Compete Every Day, and it's on every social platform. So TikTok, Instagram, you name it. CompeteEveryday.com is going to be the hub for everything there. My speaking website is Jake A. Thompson. It's a little bit separate, but go to CompeteEveryday.com. If you're an athlete, it's going to resonate with you because we're talking a lot about this stuff that I know you're learning here on the show every week, but we're doing it maybe in a little bit different light at a different venue, different channel.
Yeah. Jake, I really appreciate your willingness to come on the show.
Yeah.
And I want to thank all my listeners for tuning in. Remember, mental toughness isn't something you're born with. It's something you train. And like any muscle, it only grows when you're willing to do the hard things. Reflect honestly and show up again tomorrow ready to beat yesterday, just like Jake Thompson says. Any parting words?
Man, the competition's always within. And the sooner you as an athlete or a parent embrace this, live by this, do this, you'll be surprised what you start to achieve. And it's probably more than you thought yourself capable of.
If this episode resonated with you, don't just listen, apply it. Share it with an athlete, coach, or parent. Drop a comment, leave a review. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the Mental Weight Room on social media so you never miss a mental workout. This is Coach Antoinette and Jake Thompson signing off. And until next time, keep training your brain like you train your body and keep pushing your limits.